think we can proceed a little bit and then hope for the rest of the people to join us. Okay, hello everyone. Thanks to those of you who have already joined us. It seems that July is not the best, end of July is not the best time to have a work meeting, but still, again, thanks to everyone who has already joined. And today is the fifth meeting of our series, which is the Bioinformatics Club. And today we will be discussing different aspects of cloud computing with respect to computational biology, genomics, bioinformatics, etc. This was supposed at the beginning to be the first, not the first, the last topic of the session, but we've done a little bit of rescheduling due to discussion of dependencies, and basically this shifted this meeting to be the fifth in the series. And the last one, which will take place next time, hopefully, will be the ending of the first session, and will be dedicated to computing resource management, and we'll discuss containerization in there, which was supposed to be earlier a little bit. And then we'll also cover other aspects of managing computing resources and virtualization. Okay, as usual, we have our experts with us. Just again, I shared connection check, so I think that I have seen and heard Alona today. Hi, Alona.
Hello.
So as usual, again, we have Roman Chernechik from JetBrains Research. Roma, hi.
Yeah, hi guys.
And also, I'm not sure whether Gennady has already joined us. Gennady, if you have, then please say hi to us.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that's the people who we'll be talking about today mostly. Unfortunately, we had a pre-agreement with some of the people. For example, working for Ohio Medical Center, but unfortunately we weren't able to come in person. But I will include some of their opinions in the discussion in those places, which are basically pertinent to the opinions they've sent me. Yeah, so again, the topic of today's meeting is cloud computing, and basically we can consider like the word cloud, I think, is sort of a buzzword, maybe not now, but at least 5 years ago it was kind of a buzzword, and a lot of attention was drawn towards doing all things in the cloud. And I think many things nowadays are already done in the clouds. But generally, of course, we can consider the issue of cloud computing and basically cloud resources as several separate topics, because we may have generic computing resources, basically just a server or a virtual machine, most commonly, which is provided by some service provider. But again, instead of having a machine for computing basically in your lab or in your institution, you just order computing resources from someone else. Then there is another part of this issue, which is cloud-based data analysis. And this can be also explained into a couple of things. So first, of course, we can do all analysis in the cloud. We can do, for example, sequencing data processing, and there are platforms for this, both like general ones, generic, and more specific. And there are more again specialized solutions for example, Jupyter notebooks, which we discussed last time, which are also done in the cloud in a collaborative mode. So, for example, like Google collaborations, etc. And I hope that we'll be able to talk about all of these during today's discussion. And as always, I remind you that we have a form with some short questions regarding the topic of today's meeting. And as usual, the link to the forum was sent out a little bit before the meeting, and I have already sent it several times into the chat, and once more again now. So if you haven't yet filled out the form, please proceed and answer a couple of questions. As usual, it's quite a short one, just to get a snapshot of the opinions in terms of who of the people have used this or that type of resources. And the first topic, as I've already introduced, the first part of basically all of the cloud stuff which is out there is again computing resources which are available by like major providers. And I think the ones which are most commonly thought of when we talk about ordering some computing resources and basically getting a virtual machine or an access to some cluster in the cloud are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, which are naturally the largest basically IT giants. Of course, I think AWS, Amazon Web Services, is again, that's my impression. It's more commonly used in the software development environment. I think more people use this for hosting, maintaining, and deploying the apps, and fewer people use it for computing, though it is possible. I think more, again, this is my personal impression, and maybe people who are with us today will share a different perspective, but my impression is that Google Cloud is the one which is probably arguably most commonly used one for actually doing some sort of data processing, some sort of computing in bioinformatics and genomics. In terms of Microsoft, there is Microsoft Azure. I think that I've literally seen no one personally who has used it. Though I know people who use both AWS and Google Cloud. So I think Microsoft is a little bit less popular. But again, that's a personal impression again in the field. But of course, these are not the only platforms. Naturally, there is, for example, Yandex Cloud, which is quite popular in Russia and Eastern Europe. There is DigitalOcean, which is also, I think, mostly used by people who are doing some sort of web development, but still they also provide some sort of resources for the public. And again, there are many more smaller companies which provide the same kind of services. So, for example, there are also the providers which are not basically like giving access to some sort of virtual machines or cluster computing, but can provide like a dedicated server for rental. That's a little bit of a different thing. Naturally, for example, in AWS and Google Cloud, you basically pay for the time which the machine is running. In data centers which provide you a dedicated server, you usually pay for some sort of fixed time period, but that also may differ from depending on the actual service provider. But for example, in Europe, there is a good company called Hetzner, which is basically providing a lot of different dedicated servers of all sorts of configurations, and we personally also use infrastructure which is provided by Hetzner. So that's also an alternative solution, but that's not actually, I think, quite the same as AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure and other literally cloud computing resources. Yeah, and finally, before we proceed to actually discussing this matter, I shall say that one of the benefits which some people, at least, I've heard this opinion, but by some people, Some people say that basically taking your data analysis from your local infrastructure to a cloud-based infrastructure ensures certain kind of reproducibility in the same manner as containers, and even better than that. Because every time you get on the cloud, the AWS, GC, or other things, you usually get the virtual machine, and you may create a virtual machine specifically for a particular analysis or for a particular project, and this will ensure that you're not using some kind of server which is you don't know how long it has not been updated in terms of the basic operating system packages. And there may be all sorts of issues with, again, local infrastructure. When you get a fresh virtual machine from a cloud service provider, you are like guaranteed to basically have a certain set of packages and versions which will simplify everything in terms of reproducibility. I've heard people saying that, so it would be nice to hear the opinions of people in the audience before we move to this part. I think we can look at the results of the questionnaire. We have 14 responses for now. And here, again, in terms of the audience, it's nice to see that we have, again, all three kinds of people in here, most experienced bioinformaticians, but also some people with fewer experience and some people who are not from bioinformatics field. And in terms of using the cloud resources, I think that we have a very nice parity in terms of that half of the people who have responded to the question. Basically, 7 people say that they've used these kinds of things, and 7 people say that they've never used it. But actually, no one in the audience said that he or she does all of the analysis in the cloud. Which is, I think, quite an interesting result. And in terms of what people use the cloud resources for, I think that there is also quite a nice distribution that people basically use the resources for all sorts of stuff. But we generally have the majority of people, the majority of cloud users using that for processing of raw data and for storage. And it's a little bit surprising for me, for example, but there are fewer people who have used the cloud resources for simply solely for downstream analysis, and even fewer who have done it for hosting web applications. Well, in my practice here, I am in this category who've done something in the cloud only for web apps. So we are hosting a couple of them, and basically that's the sole reason when I personally have interacted with cloud computing, unfortunately. But it would be nice to hear people and basically the stories of what they use the cloud for, and basically what is the what service provider did you use, and actually, so what was the goal? Why do you choose cloud over some local infrastructure? Yeah, so I think that for these questions, we may start with Gena. So Gena, could you please comment on whether you've used cloud resources, and if so, which and why?
Yeah, okay. Because as usual, I will need to drop off rather early, so probably I will answer all questions in a row. So do you give me?
Excuse me, you have some sound issues, I think.
Just a couple of seconds. Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just not at home and need to. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So, because I, as usual, need to drop off earlier, so probably I will answer all questions in a row.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, as for my personal for scientific projects, I use clouds rarely. And as for my work for the software development and for customer projects, they almost always use some kind of the cloud infrastructure, or kind of the custom infrastructure built on top of cloud, because they usually don't want to construct their own server room and do something like this. So what I will say, I prefer to use local installations and prefer to have everything on my computer if I have, just because in this case I don't have any issues with internet connection, something like this, and I usually use clouds only as a backup. But when it's I believe when it's beneficial, when it's possible, first of all, when you need to perform some heavy analysis, for example, you need to call some nanopore data and use some network which requires the powerful video card, which you don't have. In this case, I believe it's much cheaper to buy some place on the Google Cloud or Amazon or somebody else just to perform your data processing. And if you need, for example, I don't know, 200 gigabytes of operating memory, it's also possible for some genome assembly. In this case, also it's easier to do it in the cloud. Just to upload data, make calculation, and download. And if you need for customer project, when you need to run some persistent infrastructure, which should be accessible 24 hours in a day with a very low downtime, of course, it's easier to do it on the clouds.
Okay.
What was the next question?
Yeah, so basically,
I believe the cloud provider.
Yeah, so we asked
cloud provider.
Yeah, regarding the provider, yeah, but yeah, if you said that you didn't use this.
Sorry.
Yeah, so if you could comment on the provider, then please, if.
Yeah, I can. So in fact, several years ago, when I worked with this, almost all our providers use Amazon, because I believe the better prices, the most important, the most I believe easy to set up infrastructure. And what I said that Amazon also constructed some infrastructure later for the genomics and for data processing. For example, now I'm reviewing the Amazonomics API, and it provides us some high level API. So you can create some abstract storage and store the data and even run some abstract processing. And this is, I believe, some beneficial things in cloud. When you need to massively run some data, for example, you have a walk-in sequencer and every week you receive, I don't know, 4 terabytes of data to process. So in this case, you can set it up in Amazon and Google Cloud. I don't know about Google API, but Amazon provides API just to run workflow in the cloud and the video, and you don't need to care about the computer's infrastructure. You just specify the Docker containers and resources, CPUs, memory, CPU, and Amazon decides where the data will be processed, and you don't need to care about this. So it's kind of higher level of abstraction. I believe other providers are also trying to do something like this, but I don't know the real progress.
Okay, thank you for the opinion. Yeah, so regarding the Amazon and basically its integration, for example, with WDL, I think I'll comment a little bit later. So then we may move on. So Yana, if you could please mute the mic, I think you have a lot of background noise. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Roma, so what's your take? Have you used the cloud computing resources in your practice, and if so, why, and which ones?
Okay, so I'm using it's mainly for large scale data processing and So it includes pipeline that's, for example, does alignment and some downstream analysis parts, which will be similar for large amount of data. So also we store data in clouds because it's about more than so the raw data was more than 80 terabytes for my current experiment, and with PROTS data it's much more. So main points are using for pipelines to make these pipelines reproducible. Mainly is some data preprocessing, which includes small part of downstream analysis and some initial alignment parts. Yes, for providers, we use computational resources in university, in Washington State University. So they have different cloud systems. Several years ago, it was like PBS Tokyo, and now it's based on IBM solution, which is called LSF. And for me, it's convenient that SnakeMake supports all these submission systems, so we can easily adapt our pipelines for these cloud resources.
Okay, but as far as I understand, yeah, thank you for your opinion. But as far as I understand, yeah, so that's not some sort of a commercial service provider. That's your basically a local infrastructure which is in the institution. It is basically accessible through in connection. Is that correct?
Yes, so basically it's commercial because the university pay for these resources, and our lab also have to decide what kind of what amount of data and CPU we need for the next year, but it's like private inside the university.
Okay, yeah. So basically, that's a little bit different, yeah. But also, it's interesting that your institution is paying for that. So I suppose that they use some sort of other company or other place where basically these resources are located. So I think I have one question regarding this reproducibility thing, etc. So in terms of reproducibility, we've talked already about virtual environments, about containerization, etc. But here, with for example, AWS, Google Cloud, etc., you basically can get, yeah, as I've said, a fresh VM for certainly like either each project or even each job. So for example, with AWS, you can submit a job and it will be basically be processed somewhere on some sort of instance, and the output will be returned. So as far as I understand, you don't have a specific virtual machine for every task, but you just submit jobs to a cluster. Yeah.
No, not exactly. So our cluster forces us to use a Docker container for every job. So basically, you can't run anything in this submitted job. So that's why we use containers, and everything is in a virtual machine in separate instance.
Okay, yeah. So that's I think more similar to what AWS has. So at least AWS Batch, the thing which is used, I think, also in this more in the software development environment, is somewhat alike. So you basically have a job in which is a container, and you run the container at a separate instance, which basically is started and then killed. So that's sort of similar, but yeah, it seems that that's just run not through a typical commercial model, but through an institution. That's an interesting case.
Maybe one of the difference that normally we have like shared disk for all these jobs, And that's why, so for example, we install different tools using Conda into this shared disk. And so if you change your Docker container, I should use some different caches folder for all these installed tools. Otherwise, it could just not work.
Okay. Yeah, that's also an interesting case. Yeah, and so let's move to Alona. So Alona, what's your experience? Have you used any of these commercial cloud computing? And if not, what's your infrastructure that you're doing your analysis on?
Yeah, I have used Google Colab once. But not for doing research. I was tutoring on a machine learning course, and we had a Google Colab virtual machine where we just shared it for students, so they can like write their code and run it, and if they encounter an error, we kind of know how to solve it, because the environment was the same for everybody. And I think this is the big plus of these things, that you can share these environments, and you can, like, if you encounter like a problem, everybody kind of like faces it, and if you solve it, everybody solves it. So I feel it's a good thing. But for me, like for doing research, I use a cluster, which is the local cluster. It's called Vienna supercomputer or something like this. And I usually use this for all my computations. Don't usually use my personal computer, only for like sometimes for downstream analysis, because we also have Jupyter notebooks and RStudio on the cluster, and it's very convenient to use. So it's like it's basically like a tab in the browser, and you just do everything, and nothing freezes in the middle of the analysis. So I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the collab, etc., I think we'll also touch upon it a little bit later today. But yeah, generally, so you basically are using a local infrastructure. Well, I think that's basically what majority people do. So the majority of people actually, at least in the research environment, I think the majority of folks have access to this or that local computing infrastructure. And it is usually easier, especially for researchers who are not able basically to pay, because all of the from AWS, Google Cloud, etc., they are of course billed. And if you are using it for like your personal account, you have to basically pay for it yourself, or otherwise you have to sometimes connect it to your institutional account, and that's, I think, problematic for large scale scientific institutions. Yeah, but again, I have in this case, yeah, Alena, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this because I think you're right. Usually people who work in science, they have their own computing resources, or they don't have money to pay for the private ones. But I think now it's like sometimes people kind of outsource bioinformatics work, and people can do like this analysis on this kind of clouds when they do it, like not kind of their main research project, but do something else. And then of course they pay themselves, but they kind of get out, like they get the outsource work. So I think that can also work. But I agree, like most researchers, they have something that is already like a working model in their place where they do the research.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting, yeah, that again we all of us have more or less the same experience with that. And like I guess I've said, I have one guy, unfortunately, was not able to come and talk to us, unfortunately. But yeah, so they have in the United States, in the I think the Ohio Medical Center, or at least people who are working like somewhere in Ohio. They said that, for example, for their purposes, they are using clouds more than as something local, generally, because if the institution doesn't have some sort of infrastructure which is suitable in terms of computing power, etc., there are cases again where using a cloud resource is cheaper than basically buying and keeping something in the institution. So for the institution, it's easier to give some money to a lab to buy remote resources, for example, at Google Cloud. And this was actually the case for the people whom I'm talking about. And this is also important to say that, for example, with Google Cloud, there was some sort of native Google Cloud integration available for many software, and they've used, again, these people from Ohio whom I'm talking about. They've used it in the context of human genetics. And in human genetics, there are basically two different kinds of things which you can do. You can do basically like individual level analysis for some sort of inherited disease, and you can do population genetics and genome-wide association studies. And regarding the genome-wide association studies, you usually have a large set of people. For example, again, if you are doing this for humans, you have a large set of people. And if you are doing, for example, whole genome sequencing, the data amounts are absolutely tremendous. So you have to basically have some sort of a solution for really big data sets. So that's the real big data scale. And the Broad Institute, who is the major guys who are developing all sorts of software for human genetics, they are developing, for example, the Genome Analysis Toolkit, or GDK, which I think we have already mentioned in some of our previous talks. And apart from GDK, they also have a library which is called Hail, which allows the basically all sorts of cohort-based analysis, including genome-wide association. Again, the main purpose of this library is doing genome-wide association studies. And here, again, you have, especially if that's a sequencing data set, so if you have like 1,000 human genomes, naturally you should have some really big computing infrastructure. And both Hail and GATK have native support for this sort of cloud resources. So for GATK, I think again I mentioned WDL, Workflow Description Language, which is a pipelining solution by Broad. It has this nice engine which is called Cromwell. I really like the logo, by the way, and they have options to submit the jobs for data processing to different cloud resources, again, more or less natively. The same is true for Hail. So in Hail, they have a native support for all three major providers, which I've shown right here. So basically, they support the AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. And again, these folks in Ohio whom I'm talking about, they've used Hail in conjunction with Google Cloud to basically perform large scale association analysis for some cohort. And there, I think, again, the main argument was that it is more or less natively integrating with these specialized libraries, at least the ones which are provided by the Broad Institute. And second important benefit is that again, it's cheaper compared to buying some sort of dedicated server. And it's also easier to manage in terms of that if you are doing one analysis and you need a specific number of machines which can perform this analysis with specific properties in terms of CPUs and memory. Yeah, you can get them once, assemble them into a cluster, because again, you can have a cluster with dedicated workers, with a specific number of them. And if you configure this once, then you've performed the analysis, and then it gets disassembled, and basically you just pay for the only for the actual time which you've run your analysis for. I think that's quite a nice thing. And again, with Hail, that's sort of natively integrating into it. Yeah, so I think I can show again this library. They have quite a nice website, and again, they have a specific section of the tutorial, which is basically how to run the analysis, and they have a separate tutorial, as you may see, for different like providers in there. So there's a separate thing for Azure, a separate thing for Google Cloud, where they basically describe how to configure this stuff for different cloud computing resources. Yeah, so that's the example from guys from Ohio. I think it's quite a useful one. Again, it shows specific use cases in which these cloud resources are really nice, especially when you have a big data scale problem, which can be easily separated into basically some multiple small scale tasks. Yeah, so that's what I have to add regarding the computing resources and getting machines and dedicated infrastructure, or not so dedicated infrastructure, from major service providers. Yeah, so having said that, I think we can move to the second part, which is the part about basically not just ordering an infrastructure, but performing an analysis in the cloud, which is a little bit different. Again, of course, you can buy a virtual machine from Google, install all of the software in there, and basically just run it, and then that's it. Again, as I've mentioned, some people believe that it gets a lot of reproducibility benefits. But apart from that, you could also use different kind of solutions specifically for particular data analysis types. And then we may talk about some different platforms. First, there are some cloud-based solutions which are specifically available for the downstream analysis. Here, I think Ilona has already mentioned Google Colab, which is a collaborative solution which allows working with Jupyter notebooks. At least I personally have only worked with the Jupyter notebooks in there. I'm not sure whether it has some sort of different extended functionality. But generally, yeah, I think it's mostly considered as a sort of a Jupyter on the cloud. And there is also other solutions. So, for example, there is JetBrains Data Lore, which I think is somewhat similar. And they all of these provide basically the ability to do downstream analysis in the cloud without using your own computer or your own server. As Ilona has already mentioned, there are solutions in both for Jupyter and RStudio. For example, in R, you have the server-based versions, and they are more or less easy to set up if you have access again to if you have access to the server, and if you can run some services in there, then it's not that hard to basically get these things going. And I think I can show what the server RStudio, for example, looks like for those of you who have not seen it previously. So basically, that's a very simple thing. We just need to connect to the server. I've done it in my background. And then I can just basically connect to a particular port in my machine, and then I will have this basically a simple and very similar and very native RStudio interface with all sorts of usual functions and usual stuff you can do, and basically that's what it is, a simple browser tab which gets you access to basic RStudio. Yeah, so you could of course you can do this on the local infrastructure, but it's interesting to hear whether there are any benefits from using actually these cloud-based solutions like Colab and Datalore. Again, I personally here am not the person who can say a lot of things about it because I have very little experience with these collaborative cloud-based editors for Jupyter and other notebooks. But it would be nice to hear some arguments from other people. We've heard from Alena the case about using it for tutoring, and I think it was quite nice. Do we have any other use cases, any other solutions and examples? Again, have you used Google Colab or other collaborative Jupyter editors?
No, never. Just some short course with Galaxy.
Okay, I see. Roma, have you worked with Colab or Datalore? I think Datalore more maybe is more probable.
So no, unfortunately, I don't work with Datalore, and also not with Colab. For educational purposes, I also used RStudio with Yandex Cloud, and it was quite convenient because we managed to prepare our computational environment for our students. And also once I used Galaxy for educational purposes. I don't like it because it have like web interface when you need to do lots of mouse clicking to just to configure your pipeline. And it was okay for some small demo for non-computational guys, but I don't think that it's convenient to use in some real analysis.
Okay, yeah, regarding the Galaxy,
I believe.
Yeah, please.
Probably the good idea what I saw in some commercial application, it's the bidirectional integration of visual interface and code. It's kind of like you are writing the civil pipeline and the system represents you in a visual way, and the both you can change the visual connections and it will change the civil code. But I believe all such platforms like Galaxy, they have the very big drawback that when you need to add some custom utility, it's usually painful. Probably it was before the Docker were created, so probably now it's possible to do it in a more easy way. But at least what I faced before, that it was an issue, and I haven't worked ever with Google Colab or other collaboration service.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so regarding the Galaxy, I think, yeah, I've also I can comment a little bit on that. So yeah, Galaxy is a little bit different naturally from Colab or Datalore, because Colab and Datalore are things which are, I think, specifically for Jupyter notebooks or almost for that, but generally for this notebook style downstream analysis. I think that Google Colab is very extensively used by machine learners, by people who are doing sort of hardcore data science. More than bioinformatics. I believe that that's due to the fact that in Google Colab you can have all of the like machine learning libraries pre-configured. and this might be tough to install them on your local infrastructure. At least I believe that this might be one reason why people prefer to use Colab, for example, for machine learning. So yeah, maybe Alona, as you mentioned, you use this for tutoring, something related to machine learning. So maybe you can comment on whether that was the case.
Yes, it was I think a 6-month course, something like this, like from learning Python to becoming a pro machine learner. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we had a Google Colab configured for students, so they can use, because there you use not a CPU but you use GPU. Mm-hmm. That's a very it's very the machine learning process is very computationally demanded thing, and I think it worked quite nice because it looks like a normal Jupyter notebook, so people were already familiar with it, and it was a very smooth, I would say. So I think it's a good thing, because also, like as you have already mentioned, like institutions, they have their own clusters, and because they are used all the time usually, but for this like programs, they are not used all the time, so it's good to configure it only in the moment that they are used, so not to pay always for this for your own private cloud computing, but just to order some memory and some resources from Google Colab, like to load some resources, and then to do your scripts into your computations. So I think it's good.
Yeah, that's a good point regarding the GPU. That's I think one of the reasons why many people prefer to go there for machine learning, because the GPUs are used in a lot of stuff which is related to machine learning, and they naturally, for example, for deep learning, I think it's the best solution due to some specifics of the architecture, which I'm not too deep into. But generally, yes, I think Diana also mentioned the nanopore data processing, and that's also a good case in which, of course, you will not use Colab for that, because Colab is not intended for doing like upstream data pre-processing. But generally, when you need a GPU and your local infrastructure, your local cluster doesn't have GPUs or has few GPUs or something else. So basically, then it might be also a motivation to go to clouds. The nanopore processing also includes natively the deep learning part, which is used to decode the signal into the sequences. So yeah, that's probably a good point regarding that. Yeah, if you need the GPUs, probably you are more likely to go to some cloud resource for that. Yeah, regarding the Galaxy, I think that we'll also touched a little bit earlier than that intended to do. And well, basically, yeah, the Galaxy is a little bit different from, not a little bit, a lot different from things like Colab and DataWare, naturally, because Galaxy is a very like generic data analytic platform. And naturally, I think that we have also in our questionnaire regarding what people have used, I think we have quite a lot of people who've used Google Colab, and we also have quite a lot of people who have used the Galaxy platform. I think it's the second popular. Of course, the non-option is also a competitor here, but Galaxy is a good competitor to Google Colab. So many people have used Galaxy, and that's interesting, because Galaxy, again, for those of you who have never seen that, that's a thing which I think has been developed quite a long time ago. And it has basically provides a graphics user interface for running all sorts of bioinformatic analysis. And they've this like public URL, you use galaxy.org, you have a fixed amount of data space which you can use for your data and processing time, which is quite okay for small scale data sets. The nice thing here again is that it provides interface for people who are not that experienced with doing all sorts of bioinformatic analysis. So you don't need a command line interface. You basically can just input stuff into the forms and submit the job. And basically, this will be doing all the same as what the command line interface does. Actually, in the background, it will convert the input from this form into a command, which will be then executed at the Galaxy server and basically return the output back to you. Yeah, and that's I think again, it's nice for educational purposes, especially for people who are not, if you are teaching people who are not that familiar with command line, with terminal, and that's also what I have used this for. You see quite a lot of data which I have here in this right panel. That's basically things which I've personally used for teaching people some bioinformatics stuff. And regarding the platform itself, it's again quite nice in terms of that it allows you, for example, to browse the results. So here I have a VCF file which I can basically look at after it has been finished, the processing has been finished. So a lot of stuff can be done in Galaxy specifically. And this publicly available use galaxy.org has a lot of tools. So for example, here you can see BWMM2, which is a sped up version of the BWA aligner. So people really care about including new tools. This is quite a fresh thing. So people care about including new tools in here. And again, it's nice for people who are not that familiar with command line, as I've already said. I also think that that's nice in terms of some tools which might be hard to install and configure on your own infrastructure, especially if these are if you need for some reason to use some sort of obsolete tool which is sort of deprecated now. You can't install some version which is not which is not compatible with something you have. You may go here and try to do something in this place. I think I have never done this, but that's at least I've heard that people consider this as a possible case. And it's nice to hear again your opinion about that, because I personally have a certain consideration that first, of course, yes, in certain cases you don't have any choice and you have to find some way to run some tool if for example you cannot do it on your own machine for some reason. But for production reasons and for actually doing the analysis, for example, for a paper, for a publication, it might be somewhat different, because it's not, I think, 100% guaranteed that you'll get the same result, even when the version is controlled, that you get the same result on some platforms like this and on your own computer. And here again, in terms of teaching, I have seen cases like this when the results are slightly different between Galaxy and the local infrastructure. I'm not 100% sure that this was with the exact matching versions of tools, but still I've seen these examples. And this relates to the question which I had in the forum, which is about whether you consider cloud-based resources a good thing, or using them a good practice, whether you think that it's okay to use platforms like this or not, whether you think that that's positively or negatively affects reproducibility. I think that here we have quite nice separation of the audience into 3 blocks. So people who think that these platforms can be used freely if the versions are controlled. There are people who, and they're in the majority, who think that specific tasks can be performed in these cloud platforms, and then some other tasks should not be. And there are people who think that cloud-based platforms should be used essentially every time it's possible. It would be nice to hear arguments for these positions which are listed here. Yeah, so let's also start with Gena. So Gena, if you're still with us, could you please comment on whether you consider these platforms okay in terms of its usage, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, and basically what's your answer here in this question? Okay, I think that I suspect that Gena might have dropped, unfortunately. Yeah, so then if it's the case, so let's move on with the folks in the experts. So Roma, what's your attitude towards these platforms? Again, not in terms of your personal practice, but in terms of generally trusting the results which are generated with some sort of cloud solutions. Are these trustworthy? Should the usage be like really encouraged or not? What's your response in this question?
I suppose for some well-established pipelines, it could be quite a convenient solution. And for example, some data providers, they all already use it. I mean that, for example, you can send your samples for sequencing, and sequencing could also include some pre-processing step, and they use all this platform and return your already pre-processed data, and all pipeline or versions of tools are fixed, and usually you can also check them. So it could be really convenience, but maybe it's hard to apply when you develop some new analysis pipeline and you want some flexibility and to play with your data, with your pipeline, with parameters, and when you don't know what will be the final result.
Okay, so that's argues. I have yeah. Thank you for the opinion. I have an option of the answer here, which is not used by anybody in the audience. But this option is that basically cloud should be avoided for production purposes, and this is what you are saying is quite the reverse. Yeah, that basically if there is a pipeline which is quite well established, if the versions are fine, then basically using these things is quite good. And basically in other cases you don't use the clouds not because you don't trust, but because you need flexibility in terms of fine-tuning, which is a statement I would agree with. Yeah, nice. So Alona, what's your attitude? So basically if there is a paper which states that we've performed the analysis using some like cloud-based solutions like Galaxy or some specific platform, do you think that is like positively or negatively affecting the results? Do you think they are expected to be more reproducible or less? So what's your attitude towards this?
I cannot say that it really, like if someone uses Galaxy, it really states for the reproducible results. I feel like that if a person uses, I don't know, like Conda environment and provides all the versions, you don't have to do it in the methods to not to overcrowd it, but like, I don't know, as the YAML file, like a supplementary data, I think it's fine. And I think it will also be okay not using the Galaxy, but using something that you did on your own, because it's also, as Roma said, you have a bit of flexibility of doing things. For this question, I was in the red, group. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, I liked more or less all the variants, but I was thinking that that like for me it's I think I tried to use Galaxy, I don't know, many years ago, and I also, for me, it was not so user-friendly because I'm used to doing something in the command line. And I think that it's like, I think it's an okay thing to also to try different tools. I was also thinking to work for the blue dot, because I think it's a good way to really try to play a bit with the data, to play with the tools, and to see, okay, that works, that doesn't work, like what results do I get? Maybe also in educational purposes to use Galaxy. I think it's a great thing, but like, as for me, I don't really use it.
Okay, yeah, I generally agree with this testing thing, yeah, and in some cases I think it's quite useful, especially again if the installation process might be problematic. But yeah, here I think that again the Galaxy is one thing, but there are also other kinds of platforms. I've included, I think, in my slides in there, I've included the logo of the Terra thing, which is a broad institute platform for some sort of genetics, mostly for genetic analysis. I think also, of course, it should be naturally compatible with all sorts of things the Broad Institute does, and again, that's the I think the most renowned institution in terms of all sorts of genomics in the world. Yeah, but they have again this TerraBio platform. I think that let's look at the results. I think no one has used it in terms of our audience. Yeah, but it's a little bit of a different thing. I think, okay, I think I've closed this, but we may try to go to it and see what it basically is. So they have different sort of solutions for different kinds of analysis. Usually they focus, for example, like on cancer data and on like medical and population genetics things. They natively integrate with all sorts of broad institute things like Hail. You can basically run Jupyter notebooks inside this thing. So it actually is, as you see, the Microsoft logo is here. So I suppose that it has some sort of shared resources with Azure, maybe. Yeah, but naturally, yeah, this is a specifically designed thing for human genetics, where you can do both pre-processing with these GATK pipelines and downstream analysis with basically the same Jupyter notebooks, etc. I think it has at some places they mentioned that they have a Galaxy support in there. I think it's in their promo video somewhere on the homepage. So here they have a promo, and they show that they have also some sort of Galaxy integration. So that's a specifically designed thing. I think it's a little bit different in terms of that. Again, Galaxy is a general purpose, like box and button. This is a thing which is designed for a particular kind of analysis, which does it again in the cloud environment, and it again, I have no personal experience with working with this thing, but again, that's slightly different in terms of that's a specialized thing, and I wonder again whether or not the results of obtained using some specialized platforms like that, whether they can be seen as something which is better in terms of reproducibility or worse, because there might be an argument like this. So if you use the cloud-based solutions, for example, like this one, you'll get the results which are more reproducible because they have standardized solutions inside their own, like this toolbox, and they are responsible basically for that. And when you install something on your own, even if you use an environment, even if you take someone else's YAML file or the YAML which is provided by software developers, even if you use containerization, you have still less control over what happens compared to when you use some commercial or public platform. Yeah, so I don't have actually a strong opinion on the matter. So I believe that yes, in some cases, and especially for things like, for example, medical genetics, this may be more standardized, but in other cases, still you may achieve more or less the same kind of or even better reproducibility of your own place where you have more ability to specifically set particular package versions. So, and basically that's I think a question which I have. So whether even if we talk about not generic but specifically designed things which do a particular task like this thing, do you consider that that's a good option in terms of, again, getting your results more reproducible, or do you think that it has no effect on reproducible versus not reproducible if you do a good job installing things? So Alona, what's your opinion?
Yeah, you know, I, as being also a half lab biologist, I would make an analogy. So for example, if you're doing immunostainings, you incubate with antibodies, primary antibodies, 16 hours in +4. But if your antibodies are tricky, I don't know, they're unspecific, you incubate less. If they are really badly staining, or you have not so many protein in your cells, you stain, I don't know, 48 hours. So, and I feel like if you are doing, I don't know, the pathology analysis, for example, you have tissue samples from cancer patients and you stain all of them, it should be very standardized, because you're really making like a decision for person's life. And this is like kind of very, I mean, it's not very obvious, but if there is this like this amount of protein that this patient should receive this treatment. But if you are, I don't know, working in the non-model organisms, you can really, or if it's a protein that you have no clue about, you can really vary these parameters like time, I don't know, the concentration of antibodies. And I feel like, as you said, that for medical genetics, I know that people developed, I don't know, like special, also like containers, but their own, to do diagnostics. Like some hospitals in US, they develop some things, yeah, for diagnostics. So medical doctors can really like click and then they get the results. And I think if it's properly done, maybe it can be a good idea, even though like the amount of data that aggregates like each year about all these cancer things, how they interact, it's very tricky. But I feel like that you have to, if you have to do something, then maybe that it can be a good idea to do at least like the upstream analysis using these containerized things, like on the, yeah, like maybe not Galaxy, but maybe like on your own. But if you're doing research and if you can justify why you use this specific program, it's okay to like play around and do your own environments. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, Rama, what's your attitude? I think again on the matter whether this does it have any impact in terms of reproducibility of stuff? Whether you use this like some specialized platform or you do the analysis on your own, and which one do you trust more? Like analysis which you've done in your own, or the analysis which is done by some standardized platform?
So basically, I agree with you and with Alona that when you have some standardized pipeline installed somewhere in cloud, likely it was configured good enough and it's quite reproducible. So because usually there are lots of so you need to make lots of solutions. Do you use default parameters? So you tweak some parameters in millions of tools for your data, and sometimes you do that randomly and then check is it result okay or not. If somebody digged into it and configure it well, maybe it will be very useful. But it's important to know who provides this pipeline. So, for example, I don't believe to random pipeline, snake-make pipeline from the internet, and I prefer to at least compare with my understanding of that. but if it's some good consortium, for example, ENCODE projects, they publish their pipelines and you can use it as reference. So which tools they use for different type of analysis, so which parameters, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's nice that we agree on this model again regarding that if you have something for production, maybe trusting and using some sort of standardized thing is not bad enough. Yeah, but the problem again, I think you've mentioned that. Yeah, if you have the pipeline is available and you can look it through, that's good. I think not in all cases that's true for the cloud solutions, and that's a problem. I think with Terra, again, no personal experience with that, but I think that here they have the ability to configure everything in terms of like WDL, etc., what Broad Institute usually does. But for some platforms, especially for medical genetics, you may have basically just a button which you click and you get the result. And on the one hand, naturally, you again you expect that you get a standardized result and by the provider, not influenced by what happens with your local infrastructure. That's a benefit. On the other hand, sometimes you don't get the access into the internals, and that's a problem of all sorts of like this buttons which basically like provide you the output for your data, and this is a downside. I think that's quite an important argument. I would comment on that. I think this box bioinformatics has been a trend, at least for the second half of the previous decade. Many people have said that well, there were times when bioinformatics was only done by people who are like experienced with sort of like terminal, etc., which can do all sorts of coding. And then it's gradually moved towards people being able to do something like in the web app or in some other app where they can click buttons and don't do some sort of heavy coding, etc. And again, this was quite a tendency in the last years. But I think that now it has come to a point at which there are many platforms that are used by some people in some cases, but researchers, especially again if they are doing some sort of custom analysis, still prefer to do things on their own if they have the ability, if they have the computing resources, and that's I think quite a tendency in terms of that. There was an idea that bioinformatics will die and be replaced by buttons. I think that now we arrive to a point when there is some sort of understanding that not everything will be replaced by the button, even given the advancement of all sorts of like GPT things, AI, etc. Yes, that's my take on that.
But that's good. But that's good. It means we will have jobs.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I think that again, besides Terra, which is of course a very specific thing for genetics, I think there is also quite a popular thing I wanted to mention, like this QIIME2 platform for metagenomics. When they have basically a standardized repository of tools which they maintain and basically aggregate all sorts of tools for microbiome analysis. And this is not basically just a cloud-based platform. Naturally, you can have it basically as a software package on your own computer, and you may have you may do some sort of analysis on Galaxy with the same software package. So they maintain stuff on Galaxy in conjunction with stuff for command line, etc. Yeah, and I think I had once a good argument with a person, unfortunately has died a couple of years ago, who was aggressively against using QIIME2. So he was basically like arguing that if you have a brain and a couple of arms, you should try to do the analysis in your command line using the source tools as they are, not using these aggregators and like things which collect things. And again, he had a long list of arguments of why it is true. Yeah, but unfortunately, yeah, he passed away, so he cannot say that again. Yeah, but that's also again the case for the same argument, basically, whether you trust things which are done by people or you do things on your own. Yeah, and that's also pertinent, for example, to web interfaces. So, for example, if someone did some web application, for example, someone created a new tool and wants to give access for the people to this tool. And sometimes people publish like a web app which is hosted somewhere, and you can run the tool not in the command line, but basically just using this interface which they provide. And I think that's also, in many cases, that's also like an interesting question of whether or not, if a tool exists solely as a web interface, if you cannot download it basically and run it as a command line and compare the results, whether the results of a web interface somewhere in the web are trustworthy. I think there's quite a lot of apps like this. And maybe that would be my final question for today. So if we're not talking about, again, cloud-based platforms, but simply about applications which are for specific purposes, like annotating genetic variants with some stuff, or performing enrichment analysis on genomic tracks, like the cheap Atlas does. So, for example, do you think that well, basically just taking the output of a web server is always okay, or do you usually prefer like to take something in a command line interface and run a command line if you have two options, basically a web interface or a command line? Which one do you think is more trustworthy? So Alona, what's your opinion on that?
I personally do it. I use web interface tool. Like last I used was to find the nuclear localization signals and sequences. And there is like the database for all the signals, and I think you can even contribute to this. And I think it's quite good, and I use it. So you just, like, it's very simple. You just upload your file and you get the CSV file where the signal is. Amazing. And but what I do, I also do it like in command line in another tool, which tries to also identify these things. And I cannot say that I do it because it's like command line versus web application. I just use several tools, because for all this prediction and things, it's better to use like several approaches. So I think it's okay to trust a tool which is even only like a web application, because sometimes the thing is very simple, like finding a signal peptide. This is a very simple thing that you don't have to really, you can even, I mean, you can code it yourself, but why if you can just like upload things and it will find the signal peptide? So for me, it's like this. I double check just with another tool. If the results intersect, I trust them more. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. So Roma, do you have anything to add on that? So basically, like web versus CLI, which one is more trustworthy?
So I don't understand the question. So both applications, and it's not a big deal is it's running locally or in some clouds. So for me, if the tool is well-known, published, and cited many times, it's okay to use it. And with web form, it's much more easier to use it. Just make things faster.
Yeah, that's a nice argument. Yeah, that's basically that's what I expected to hear. Yeah, so generally, I generally agree with that. Yes, if the thing is well known, then web is usually okay. Yeah, regarding things which are not that well renowned, not that well cited. So sometimes people publish something which is again not has been tried before, some new kind of analysis which you may do. I usually am a little bit suspicious if the thing is specifically available as a web and not as a runnable command line thing, because again, in some cases, yeah, if you are using these results for something important, and again, there are no competing tools which you may compare to, as Alona said, and this again, the tool itself is not well renowned, and you cannot basically just take it and run it and look at it. especially again if the code is not available. You have only the interface out there. That's a little bit suspicious of why that people would do this. But generally, of course, for things which are well cited and which have good reputation, it surely doesn't matter, in my view. Okay, yeah. So I think that's it. That's all what I wanted to discuss for today. As usual, thanks to everyone for participating, for answering the forum, for commenting. Yeah, next time we have our last meeting of the session, and I think we'll do it in a little bit different format. So this 5 meetings until today, we had more of a like discussion with different opinions. Next time we'll try out, I think, a more condensed type where we'll invite somebody to provide some more basic theory regarding sorts of like virtualization, containerization, what and why. So I hope that will be more interesting and more useful for people who are less experienced with using containerized solutions and basically all of this stuff like virtual machines, etc. But we'll also add some elements of the discussion to basically talk about what to do and what's best. So I hope that this will be our format for the end of this session. Yeah, and for today, thanks to everyone for participating. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.